News this morning, Arsenal have agreed a £67.5 million deal with Crystal Palace for Eberechi Eze. A very good morning. It has been a whirlwind 24 hours for Eze. We'll have in-depth analysis on a move that has rocked North London. Would a move to the Emirates be the final piece in Mikel Arteta's Premier League winning jigsaw? And where does this leave Thomas Frank and Tottenham? After missing out on Gibbs White and now Eze, we discuss their options. And what about Richarlison's future? We'll get into the shock news that he had been considered as a part exchange option for in their failed bid for Eze. Good morning to you at home and to European football expert Andy Brassel, and our chief correspondent Kaveh Solakul joins me as well. Just to start then here on Good Morning Transfer, some breaking news to bring you, and that is that Bournemouth have completed the signing of Amin Adli from Bayer Leverkusen for £25 million. Bournemouth spending in this window backing Andoni Iraola. So that's just a little bit of breaking news to get us started. But now, let's get on to the transfer, which has got plenty of people talking. Eze was Spurs, Kaveh, it's now Arsenal. A remarkable turnaround. Please just explain how on earth this has happened.
Well, look, today is a great day to be an Arsenal supporter. I mean, they have pulled off a real transfer coup because Eberechi Eze was on his way to Tottenham, but at the last minute, Arsenal decided to match Spurs' offer. Also, it's very important that the player himself, growing up, he was an Arsenal supporter. He's always wanted to play for Arsenal. So his wish was very important in this as well. But Arsenal moved at the 11th hour, matched Spurs' bid, 60 million plus around 7.5 million in add-ons. Remember, he had a release clause which expired on Friday, which was worth up to £68 million. But now he's on his way to Arsenal. I'm afraid it's bad news for Spurs fans. Spurs fans are very, very angry about the way this has turned out. But I do have some sympathy for them because they tried to sign him. But at the end of the day, the player has set his heart on moving to Arsenal.
Yeah, we'll get the Spurs perspective on Eze in just a second. But like Kaveh mentioned there, Andy, obviously Eze being a boyhood Arsenal fan, he was in the Arsenal Academy. Do you think Arsenal were always in for him? Was this always going to happen?
Well, I guess it seems like Spurs might have been used a little bit in this. I think that always feels like that in this case. I mean, I can understand why the fans are upset, but what really more could they have done? You know, they
get it done sooner.
Well, they agreed a fee, and if the player wants to drag his feet and see what else is happening, look, we're sitting here talking, and there's 10 days left. So you know, there's no massive rush for it to happen. I don't think the clock was working in Spurs' favour as well. Look, if he really wants to go back and lance that boil, you know, no one can stop him, and nothing that Tottenham could say really could change that, I suppose. But obviously, with what happened with Morgan Gibbs White as well, it's incredibly frustrating. And in both cases, I don't know what Spurs could have done that differently.
Do you not think they could have got it done? Because they've known since James Maddison's injury, which was before the season even started, that they needed a number 10 with Kulusevski out as well. Why has it taken them this long to get a number 10 over the line?
Well, I guess it's a lot to piece together.
Yeah.
I guess the fact is that Eze is he's not one in a million, but he's one in several 100,000, I think it's fair to say. Because, you know, if you're looking for someone who's played a couple of hundred Premier League games, who's got that experience, who's an England player, who you know can do it in the Premier League, I mean, it's really difficult to go out and get someone else like that. I just wonder what Spurs' options are now, really.
Yeah.
If you're looking at Europe, because there aren't a whole lot of number 10s out there, I wonder if it's worth a little go for Brahim Diaz. Because the latest news from Madrid is it looks like Rodrigo is not going anywhere. Xabi Alonso would like to keep him, and the offers aren't really out there at the moment. Now, Brahim Diaz is someone who's at Manchester City. He's won leagues in 3 different countries. He's a match changer in all the big matches that he plays. 26 and can't get in the Real Madrid 11.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, that looks like a bit of Spurs.
Yeah. I wonder if they'll miss out on him as well. Maybe not. Maybe not. Maybe not. They won't. No. They maybe not. They won't miss out on him. Let's sort of focus on Arsenal then, Carve. And we sort of always sit here and talk about strength and depth and Mikel Arteta's squad perhaps not being the strongest in terms of the full set. But Eze is exactly the sort of player when you look at that Arsenal squad that they need, whether that's on the left, whether that's a number 10 sort of. We could play him if Martin Odegaard comes off. He just feels like it's a perfect fit. Look,
they've been interested in signing him all summer. And Arsenal fans were sort of crying out for Arsenal to make a move for him. But when you looked at how much business Arsenal had already done this summer, you could make a case for the fact that, look, they need to sell before they sign somebody else. The really interesting question for me is this move just motivated by the fact that Kai Havertz picked up this injury on Sunday at Old Trafford? Is that why they've moved at the 11th hour? Or have they been really, really smart and they have done what a lot of big clubs do now, which is not get involved in a bidding war for Eze? So what they did is they were aware of the situation regarding Eze. They always knew that ultimately he would choose Arsenal if he had a choice. So what they did is just took a back seat, said, let Spurs get on with it, let them negotiate with Steve Parish, let them hammer out a deal. And once a deal is agreed, at the 11th hour, we will pick up the phone, get in touch with Crystal Palace and say, we will match what Spurs have agreed and the player wants to come to us. So they wouldn't get involved in a bidding war. I'm not sure exactly what happened, but I think it's a bit of both. I think they always were interested in making a move for Eze, but obviously this injury to Kai Havertz has forced their hand a little bit. Do
you agree with that, Andy?
Yeah, I think Spurs advancing and agreeing the deal has given Arsenal the little nudge that they needed. I guess the question is, though, I don't know what you guys think. Is he the piece? And it's a bit of a cliche,
missing piece.
Is he the piece that pushes them over the top?
Do you think so?
No.
No.
I think he's really good to have, and I think he improves Arsenal, and I think he really helps them. But if you're asking me, does this make them title favourites, it's still a no for the moment, especially when, well, a certain centre-forward we might mention who might be heading for the Northwest a little bit later on, that would shake up the picture again, wouldn't it?
So what does, if Eze doesn't make Arsenal title favourites, then what does make Arsenal title favourites when you look at that squad that they've got under Mikel Arteta now?
I don't know, I just need to believe. I think getting through Christmas and being top two in the back half of March, that makes me believe, really.
What do you think, Carve? Have Spurs just handed Arsenal the Premier League trophy?
I think I'd agree with Andy. I think Liverpool are still the favourites, Man City. But I think Arsenal are right in there. I think Arsenal have got a brilliant goalkeeper, incredible defence, brilliant midfield. I think up front, maybe they're not as good as some of their rivals, and they've got injury problems up front as well. For instance, the only fit striker they've got at the moment is Gyökeres. Gabriel Jesus is out again. We don't know how long Havertz is going to be out for. So there's still some Arsenal fans out there who are saying, great news, let's celebrate the fact that we've got Eze, but we want to sign another forward as well, depending on what happens, for instance, with Trossard.
I mean, Andy, do you agree with that? Do you think Arsenal might still dip into the market to try and find a Kai Havertz replacement?
Where would the money come from?
Yeah.
I think you've got to be looking at a loan, really, don't you? And I don't think we can turn our noses up at that. I think, especially when you get to the last 3 or 4 days of the transfer window, teams get in a situation where they really need someone or they really need to shift someone. And then the boundaries start moving. I think what Carve was talking about before with this whole Eze deal, I think patience is the key thing, really, in the window. I know coaches and managers always want their squad all set for pre-season training. That's just not realistic nowadays, is it? Especially when you've got the Club World Cup running into the Premier League season or the Premier League pre-season as well. So I just think it's about a bit of patience. There will be opportunities out there in the last 3 or 4 days of the window.
Let's get the Spurs perspective now, because I suppose Andy said, Carve, that Spurs almost did everything they could. Do you believe they did everything they could and maybe they should have got this over the line, or maybe they can be forgiven for what's happened?
I mean, look, this is not Football Manager. This is real life. And, you know, Spurs are down at the moment. I don't want to kick Spurs when they're down. I'm trying to see it from the perspective of the hierarchy at Spurs. I think they did everything they could to try and sell Eze. OK, I hear a lot of Spurs fans, especially on social media, saying, why didn't we just trigger the release clause?
Yeah.
He had this release clause. Why didn't we do it
And it's a
before?
similar amount to what Arsenal are paying.
Exactly. So why didn't we do it before Friday? Just put the money down, then he would be our player. Arsenal would have been out of the equation. We don't know. Maybe they tried to do that. And maybe the player himself dragged his feet and said, I'm not sure, even though Spurs are willing to trigger the release clause, I'm not sure I want to go to Spurs. Maybe he was keeping his options open. So I understand Spurs fans are very, very angry. They're criticising the owners again. They're criticising Daniel Levy again. But I think we should keep things in perspective. These kind of things happen the whole time in the transfer market. Spurs did their best to sign him. But ultimately, everybody knows Eze is an Arsenal fan.
Yeah.
His family are all Arsenal fans. He played for Arsenal until he was 13 when he was released. He's always wanted to play for them. The question is, why didn't they trigger the release clause? Who knows? Maybe the release clause had to be paid in one lump sum.
Yeah.
So maybe Spurs were thinking, let's wait until it's expired, then we can get better payment terms. I don't know. But I think, OK, everyone's having a laugh and making fun of Spurs fans this morning, but I think we should tone it down a little bit. I can understand why they're angry, but I don't think it's the absolute disaster that people are making it out to be.
Yeah, I think it's maybe perhaps that it's Arsenal that they've lost out to. I think if it was any other club, they probably wouldn't.
Yeah, I mean, if I was a Spurs fan, I would be feeling terrible this morning. But look, worse things have happened in the transfer market.
Yeah.
I remember Emmanuel Petit, almost being at Spurs' training ground, then getting a mini cab to Arsenal's training ground, signing for Arsenal. Remember what happened to Willian? He was about to sign for Spurs last minute.
Thoroughly enjoyed that.
He hopped in a cab and went to sign for Chelsea as well. So I think Spurs fans have experienced this before.
I think we have to say, realistically, for the moment, take away the Eze and his family support Arsenal bit of it. If you're thinking, I want to win the Premier League this season, which are the two clubs you sign him for? I mean, that's the reality of it. And I'm not just saying that because of where Spurs finished last season, obviously. You have to prove yourselves over time. Just like I feel that Arsenal aren't the definite title favourites.
And if you're a real Arsenal fan, it'd be difficult to play for Spurs. If you are like, if you're a real Arsenal
fan. Does that matter? I always wonder, does that matter nowadays? Like when these players grow up supporting a team, but I feel like that affiliation to a club perhaps goes when you actually start playing professionally. Yeah.
I would.
So will Eze still be an Arsenal fan? I don't know.
Maybe I'm just heartless for thinking that, but I think that, yeah.
Let's talk about, because Richarlison was reported to have been offered to Crystal Palace in this deal for Eze. Obviously,
talking of heartless,
scored 2 worldies on the weekend. Is keeping Dominic Solanke out the side as it stands. I mean, Carve, what does this mean for Richarlison?
It's going to be an interesting atmosphere at Tottenham's training ground this morning when he turns up. I wonder what kind of mood he's going to be in this morning. But I suppose he's been in football long enough to know that these kind of things happen. I think he's only got 2 years left on his contract at Tottenham. He's been linked with lots of other clubs as well, but he's just got to focus on doing what he does on the pitch. I could not see him moving to Crystal Palace as part of a deal for Eze. I don't think Richarlison, with respect to Crystal Palace, would want to go to Crystal Palace at this stage of his career. And also, I don't think Crystal Palace would have been interested in a swap deal. Swap deals have really gone out of fashion in the sort of modern age of football.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose it's difficult, isn't it? Because you're talking about a guy who is, Brazil's starting forward when he's fit. But having said that, I think as a Tottenham fan, you might think, that would have been a bit too much to sacrifice. If you go back a month, probably no one's bothered. So I think really he's just having a moment, and hopefully for him and hopefully for Spurs that moment continues. But yeah, I think sometimes you're just going to say it's just the business.
Yeah, well, that's the Spurs perspective then. And what about, I suppose, Crystal Palace in all this, Carve? Because they have sold arguably their best player to Arsenal, it looks like. But I suppose the question is, why have they let Eze go?
I think because he's got 2 years left on his contract, and also because Crystal Palace need the money. I think pretty much every summer they do sell a player. Last summer they sold Michael Olise to Bayern Munich. But if I was a Crystal Palace fan, I'm thinking, 3 months ago we won the FA Cup and we won the Charity Shield. Now we've been demoted from the Europa to the Conference League. Now we've lost our best player. Where is the ambition? There was a brilliant column by Martin Samuel in the Times yesterday who said that, OK, Crystal Palace fans dislike Mr Marinakis at Nottingham Forest, but surely they'd love to have somebody like Marinakis running their club, because there is no way that Mr Marinakis would sell Eze. Yeah. He would say to him, I don't care if you're an Arsenal fan, I don't care if your family have got a season ticket at the Emirates, you are not going anywhere. You're a Crystal Palace player. And also, Crystal Palace are owned by some very, very rich people. I think 75% of the club is owned by 3 American billionaires. So maybe it's part of a wider conversation. Why do these clubs need to sell their players? Because Crystal Palace have very, very rich backers. Surely we want to have a league where teams can carry on investing and keep their players. We don't just want all the best players ending up at the same big clubs the whole time.
That's what we'd love, of course, from a neutral perspective. But the reality is Crystal Palace are Crystal Palace, FA Cup or not. And, you know, players who play for them will want to play for bigger clubs. And also, I think Wilfried Zaha is kind of a precursor to this as well. You think there's someone who was one of the better players in the Premier League, who had ambitions to play Champions League, who attracted interest from, say, Dortmund, Chelsea, clubs like that. They couldn't go anywhere because he was locked in on a big contract. Now, I think Eze and Mark Gay, you look at their contractual situations, they're almost a legacy of Uncle Wilf, aren't they? They've sort of not got themselves into that sort of situation. And what that means is Palace are forced to make a choice if they don't want to lose a lot of money. And that's the choice they've made, even when the buyout clause has gone past. I suppose the difficulty is that man there, really, Oliver Glasner, someone who's a winning coach, an ambitious coach who does well wherever he is, who I'm sure bigger Premier League clubs with respect to Palace will be looking at thinking that could be a bit of us, one managerial change down the line. How do they please him? How do they keep him? I think what Palace do in the next 10 days is really important, because even losing those two, assuming that Gay goes before the end of the window, they're still one of the contenders to win the Conference League, which 100%. Of course they enter tonight. But in terms of keeping Glasner, in terms of building, which I think from that mid-table spot in the Premier League, because the top 7 or 8 is so difficult to build, it's very expensive and very difficult. They could throw 200 million at the squad and still not get in the top 8. Yeah. So I think it's a difficult position for them to be in, isn't it?
Yeah, it definitely is. And you mentioned Mark Gay there, Carve. What does this mean for this move? Because we all know that the next year he can go on a free, but do you see a world in which with, you know, Europa Conference League football, potentially they've got to get through their qualifier, a world in which they let both of them go this summer? I
think it's possible. I think it depends what happens in the game tonight. I think if they win the game easily tonight, so that almost, you know, they're through the playoff, it doesn't matter about the return leg next week. I can see a situation where maybe Liverpool step up their interest in Mark Gahey and make an increased bid for him in the next couple of days. And then Crystal Palace, I think, would have a decision to make. But having heard from Steve Parish, he said we cannot have a situation where a player as good as Mark Gahey leaves on a free transfer next summer. So I think they would possibly be open to selling both those players. But it's not all doom and gloom for Crystal Palace, because Eberechi Eze will be replaced. And if Mark Gahey was to leave, he would be replaced as well. They're not just going to take the money and put it in the bank. They are going to try and improve the squad overall. And that's what the manager, Oliver Glasner, is demanding.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see who Crystal Palace potentially buy to replace Eberechi Eze, who looks like he is off to Arsenal. Right, there's still so much for us to get through on Good Morning Transfers. If you think Spurs fans are frustrated this morning, then spare a thought for Newcastle fans who might be seeing another target slip away. We'll tell you more next. Welcome back. Eberechi Eze might have become the most exciting move of the summer, but the one that has dominated the headlines all summer long has, of course, been Alexander Isak. He reported to Newcastle's training ground yesterday, just hours after his stunning statement on social media, where he stated that trust had been broken and that the relationship couldn't continue. I mean, Kaveh, Isak's on strike. The club, him and the club have made completely different statements, but ultimately, the biggest factor here is surely are Liverpool going to match what Newcastle want for Alexander Isak in this window?
I cannot see Liverpool spending £150 million on a player. Liverpool are a very, very rich club. They're very, very well run, but in this day and age, I'd find it hard to think any Premier League club would spend £150 million on a player, no matter how good that player is. I think Isak has got a problem now because time is running out. He obviously wants this move to Liverpool, but it's not going to happen unless Newcastle find a replacement, at least one replacement, and unless Liverpool come back in and make a higher offer. I'm very interested to see what happens next Tuesday. Now, the reason I say that is because on Monday, the two sides are playing each other. So if you're a conspiracy theorist, maybe you're thinking the two sides are waiting for this game to be out of the way, and then Liverpool will re-engage with Newcastle.
Yeah, I mean, you couldn't write it, could you? As this transfer window saga goes on, that they're playing each other. So that's going to be interesting. That's the Monday night football, Newcastle against Liverpool. Now, one of the Liverpool signings, they've had a fantastic summer in terms of incomings, Andy. Hugo Ekitike has made a brilliant start to his Liverpool career. Like we say, like 150 million is a lot of money for Isak. But do you think they do need another number 9? But should they be spending 150 million on another number 9 when they've got Ekitike?
Well, they've lost quite a few forward players. So I think to add Isak to it makes sense. I think it's clear that Isak and Ekitike could play together. And funnily enough, you see him playing as on solo, really, for Newcastle. But he plays in a 2 with Gyökeres for Sweden. And I think that shows how good... Yeah, it shows how good both of them are, that they can switch from a 1 to a 2 when you don't have a lot of front 2s in world football these days. So it shows both of their adaptabilities. Look, Newcastle they can't be forced to give him away, and they shouldn't be forced to give him away. Contractually, they're in a strong position, and ultimately, players who score 23 Premier League goals for, we have to say, below elite teams, because Newcastle haven't proven themselves to be a Premier League challenger yet, they don't grow on trees. They need to ask for a lot of money for him, because the fact is, when they replace him, if they replace him, they would be going for someone like an Ekitike. In fact, I wonder, obviously Liverpool are very pleased with Ekitike, but they've kind of made the move more difficult by going for Ekitike in the first place, who obviously Newcastle were very, very keen on and have held an interest in for a very long time. But that's the sort of player that Newcastle would be going for to replace Ekitike, the sort of player that Isak was when he arrived. A Benjamin Sesko, really. Yeah. Someone who you know is a very good player with a very high ceiling, but is not quite there yet. But once that player is there, like Alexander Isak is, what are they meant to do? Give him away because he's in a mood? I mean, they can't.
Yeah, that's very true. It felt like, Kaveh, that in the Newcastle statement, they left the door open for reconciliation, but it felt like Alexander Isak slammed that door straight shut. So is there any path to reconciliation here, do you think?
Oh, definitely. I think, if Newcastle don't sign a replacement, if Liverpool don't increase their offer, he's going to have to come back with his tail between his legs. And I think Eddie Howe has left the door open to that happening. Eddie Howe in his public statements hasn't sort of gone overboard in criticising Alexander Isak. And at the end of the day, he's got a contract with Newcastle. He's got 3 years left on his contract. If the transfer window closes, he hasn't got his dream move to Liverpool. What's he going to do? Is he going to stay on strike indefinitely? No, he's not. We're probably going to get another social media statement. We'll probably get an interview with the club media where he comes out and maybe we'll have a few tears and he'll beg for, he'll beg for forgiveness. He'll say he loves Newcastle. He's a Geordie. He's been misunderstood. He was badly advised.
Oh, this is going on Hollywood.
He'll change agents. Yeah. I can see him signing a new contract. Because this all started with a disagreement about the fact that he thought he was promised a new contract. And he didn't get that new contract. So who knows? If the window closes, we've seen stranger things happen in the transfer market.
I mean, we talk about the Newcastle fans. They've made it very clear on their opinions on what they think. But what happens if Alexander Isak is welcomed back in and he accepts that he's welcomed back in and then he starts playing and scoring goals for Newcastle? Then what? They're just not going to celebrate?
Well, they are, aren't they? But look, the fact is, football's full of cordial relationships, marriages of convenience. Like Cristiano Ronaldo found it immensely frustrating that he spent 9 years at Real Madrid where he scored more than a goal a game and he never felt like he got that unconditional love. But I don't think that'll really matter.
Yeah.
If it's working for them in Premier League and Champions League, they've got a huge season ahead of them. It's funny, if you take out the Isak bit of the summer, which is obviously very hard to do, Newcastle have had a decent transfer window. You can look at the players that haven't come and it's easy to spin it as disaster. It's not. I think they've actually built the squad quite well. What they've needed to do ever since Mike Ashley went was have a massive squad overhaul, which is clearly going to take a number of years. They're getting there now. I think you look at the fact they've got reasonable depth. Clearly, Wissa, if he comes, will not be an Isak replacement because clearly he's a very capable Premier League goal scorer. But what they wanted to do is upgrade from Callum Wilson to have someone who's not just good but available all the time and proven.
Yeah, we'll get on to Wissa chat in just a second. Up next for Newcastle is none other than Liverpool. It's set to be a blockbuster Monday night football and you can watch it all on Sky Sports Premier League from 6:30. You are not going to want to miss that. Well, as for incomings then at Newcastle, they've had a deal worth £40 million rejected by Brentford for Wissa. I mean, Carve, bring us up to speed, please, on what's going on here.
Look, I think there's a little bit of a difference between the Wissa situation and the Isak situation in the sense that Wissa has not gone on strike. He has just made it very, very clear to Brentford, or his advisors have, that he wants to leave the club. And he doesn't have a future at Brentford. So he is totally focused on moving to Newcastle. I think perhaps some bridges have been rebuilt between him and the club. There was a suggestion that he had sort of discussions with the club owner a couple of days ago, and perhaps that is why Newcastle made this improved bid. But the improved bid is still not at a level which is acceptable to Brentford. But I think his mindset is on the fact that he's going to become a Newcastle player before the window closes.
I mean, Andy, we can have a look. You know, we all know Alexander Isak had an absolutely brilliant season, but are people underestimating the season that Wissa had at Brentford? They
are. You take away the penalty goals and they've got the same amount of Premier League goals in pretty much the same amount of games. And I guess it's the fact that Wissa's a little bit older. He plays for a team that aren't challenging for European football that allows us to forget this. But of course, that makes it a greater achievement. Bear in mind, we go back to the start of last season and you think, a couple of people out there thinking, with no Ivan Toney, Brentford are in trouble. And maybe they're looking over their shoulders. And that, obviously, a lot of credit of that goes to Thomas Frank, but it goes to Yoane Wissa as well and the other players there. It's a difficult situation because Brentford haven't quite got Newcastle over a barrel, despite the fact that they've taken a few PR batterings in terms of transfers this summer. But the fact is that Brentford have to be careful as well because they're heading into that sort of gaze zone. You know, he's only got a year left. So this is something that they're going to have to make a decision when it comes to the end of this window. But they need a replacement as well. Because I think from Brentford's perspective, if you're losing that amount of goals, you need a replacement.
Much all their goals, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's fine to write off 40 million if that's against staying up in the Premier League, really, isn't it? Because obviously they've lost some key players. So they're a few steps further down the line than Palace are when you look at the possibility of them losing two key players. So I think Brentford are right to take their time. They've got to be careful.
Yeah, they do. Well, that's Isak and Wissa we've been talking about, but another striker whose future is linked to this whole situation is Chelsea's Nicholas Jackson. We'll assess his options after the break.
Coming up this morning for you at 10 o'clock, Sky Sports Fan Club, the show that puts you right at the heart of the debate. And we are joined by the brilliant Peterborough owner, Dara McAntony, and we're asking if Tottenham miss out on Eze. Looks like it's going to happen. Going to Arsenal potentially. Does that give Mikel Arteta's side the chance, at least the chance, of being title favourites? How much will this one hurt you, Spurs fans? Get in touch. We'll also get Dara's thoughts on how he would handle, this is an interesting one, Alexander Isak's situation, and much, much more. And here is how you get in touch with us. If you want to send us a voice note, leave us a message on WhatsApp, simply scan the QR code on the screen. It'll take you right there. Alternatively, you can use the WhatsApp number 07514 917 075, or give us your views on X, Instagram and Facebook. Use the hashtag Sky Sports FC.
Thank you very much, William. Right, let's talk Manchester United now, because Napoli are pushing for the loan signing of Rasmus Højlund, according to Sky in Italy. That's after AC Milan could not convince Højlund to join them under the terms of the deal on offer. Milan wanted a loan with an option, while Højlund and United's preference was a permanent deal. I mean, we've got European football expert Andy Brassel in the studio, so it feels the first question, Andy, is feels like Manchester United feel like Serie A is the place to sell their players.
Yep.
Why is that?
There's no money there, is there?
So why is...
But because it's a good profile of league to reinflate a player's value. And that is exactly the spot that Højlund's in at the moment. If you look at the players who've come out of difficult times, not just English players, who've come out of difficult times in the Premier League to do really well there. Look at Scott McTominay's image now. You know, he's on the Ballon d'Or list. And go before that, you go Lukaku, Smalling, Young. You can go through them all, and they've reignited their careers there. Now, look, I think Højlund and United, if that is really their view, that they want a permanent deal, well, you know, I'd love a Lamborghini, but it's not going to happen. The fact is that his value has dropped so much over the last 2 years. The best thing for him and for United is to loan him out and get him to a point where he's sellable. At the moment, he is not sellable for anything near what they paid for him. Even if you're taking off the bits for amortisation, it's just not worth their while. I don't see how they can get a reasonable deal for him. Whereas if he goes to Serie A and shows a bit of what we thought he was about, then it's a lot different. And maybe this Lukaku injury opens it up for him.
But then somebody like Anthony has gone to Spain, and he did pretty well at Real Betis last season.
Well, that's an advert for the loan, isn't it?
But no one's coming in and offering big money for him. So it just seems that these players that United are stuck with because of mistakes they've made in the transfer market, they just can't move them on, even when they go out on loan and do pretty well, like Jadon Sancho. You know, he went to Chelsea for the second half of last season, did okay. Chelsea were pretty ambivalent about keeping him, were willing to keep him as long as he took a wage cut. He wasn't willing to take a wage cut, and they said, all right, you know what, not interested.
I mean, straight away, that's the problem there. The answer's in the question, isn't it? The fact
wages.
is, yeah, and this is a problem for every Premier League club. If you've got failing players, where do you put them? I mean, the Saudi Pro League worked for that for a bit, but if they're not going to Saudi, where are they going? Now, maybe the Turkish Super League comes back into the picture later in the window, but I think for the moment, you do have to go out there and prove the players are worth something. I mean, it's been a difficulty. You think of Marcus Rashford, for example. He went out there and did pretty well in the second half of last season for Aston Villa, in a Premier League context as well. But was it? I realise Villa are in a particular situation, but no one in the Premier League looked at that and thought, you know what, we're going to bet the farm on him. There was enough to show there's a player still there, but there's not enough to say we're going to bet everything on him. And I feel that was the case definitely with Sancho when he went to Chelsea and Dortmund. There's enough to say there's still a player there, but is there enough to say there's a game-changing player that we want to invest a lot in, and maybe not? If Højlund's got a full season to do it, then maybe at least that brings it closer to the mark where United find themselves an acceptable deal.
Sancho's an interesting one, because is it basically he is just holding out now for a club that is going to pay his wages? He's not willing to take a pay cut. And are any clubs in Italy going to do that? He's on a ridiculous amount of money at Manchester United.
I think the situation is that because he's on big wages, because he's likely to leave on loan, although I think United would prefer to sell him on a permanent deal, it's one of those things that's going to get done late in the window because clubs know that they can get a better deal out of United regarding the loan fee and also how much of his wages they would have to pay. But the problem United have with Sancho, they don't need me to tell them, is that they bought him for a big fee, and also they gave him a big contract. And there aren't any clubs out there who are willing to pay a big fee for him or pay him the kind of wages that he's on at United.
I think Roma could still happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Why would you turn down Roma?
Yeah, why?
You live in Rome.
Yeah.
You play for like an incredible club. You know,
an attacking coach and Gasperini.
Exactly.
I think there's a lot to recommend it. But look, if it was all about the money for Sancho, he would have taken the deal from Fenerbahce a month and a half ago, and he hasn't done that. So clearly his ambition is to play for what he sees as a big club in Europe and somewhere where he needs to feel love around him. And that's why he's excelled at Dortmund. I wonder if there's a little bit of Dortmund in the background here, because there are people in the dressing room who would love to have him back. I don't think the club are convinced that it's a great deal, but I think from a Dortmund-Sancho perspective, there's something there that won't go away. You know, that's where he first emerged, and he's got a lot of supporters there. Now, whether the club think that that's the right deal and whether they think it's a financially expedient deal is different, but I think that's possibly part of what's holding up the Roma deal reaching completion.
Yeah, so where will Jadon Sancho end up? That is the question. Well, up next, Chelsea are closing in on $250 million in money made from sales this summer. And how will they be reinvesting it? We'll talk all things Chelsea next. Welcome back to Good Morning Transfers. It's been an incredibly busy window, as it always is, for Chelsea, with plenty of ins and plenty of outs, and they're not done yet. They're looking to add at least 2 more, including Man United's Alejandro Garnacho. Carve, it feels like Alejandro Garnacho has his heart set on moving to West London, but it feels like right now Manchester United and Chelsea are quite far apart in terms of valuation.
I mean, it appears as if he is sort of, he loves Chelsea because he's turned down a move to Bayern Munich because he only wants to move to Chelsea. And that's the problem that Manchester United have got, because they value him at around £50 million. Chelsea don't feel that he's worth that, even though I think you could make a pretty good case for the fact that he is worth £50 million, because Madueke has gone for about 50, Gittins has gone for about 50, Alanga's gone for about 50, and Garnacho is an Argentina international. He's only 21 years old. But of course, Chelsea's point of view is this is a guy who's got no future at United. He's been told he can leave, so we're not going to pay over the odds for him. And I think Chelsea feel that they can get him for around £30 million, and they're just biding their time. I'm being told they're in active discussions with United, really good relations between the two clubs. I think the direction of travel is he's going to end up being a Chelsea player.
Well, could Xavi Simons, Andy, end up being a Chelsea player? Because I suppose, like Alejandro Garnacho, it does feel like he's been telling clubs that he only wants to move to Chelsea. But in the process of all this, he's been playing for Leipzig and he's been playing brilliantly. Really
well. He played at Sandhausen at the Cup in the weekend and set up a goal, scored a goal at the end, played the full 90 minutes. And it's really interesting, the approach of different players, isn't it, to I really want to move. It's like, well, why would I sit on my hands? I'll just be brilliant and prove how much they should want me in the meantime. Look, Leipzig are in a difficult situation with Xavi Simons because they signed him permanently after a very successful loan spell for a fee that could rise to €80 million. So they can't give him away. You know, they're in a difficult situation. They know the Premier League is the place to sell him to get most of that money back. Now, of course, there's been the possibility mentioned of maybe a swap, that Christopher and Nkunku would go back there. As I understand that wouldn't work at all wage-wise, because he's earning twice as much as Chelsea as he was at Leipzig. And Leipzig, since this summer, they've brought in this new austerity era where their top earner is going to get $5 million. So that can't really happen.
Could you see Tottenham maybe making a move for him now they've missed out on Eze?
It'd be a really good move. I think it'll work brilliantly. But again, whether he would bite, because he seems quite invested in the Chelsea idea, has to be the question. But if I was Xavi Simons, I would be looking at somewhere where a team could be built around me. To me, that feels far more likely at Tottenham than at Chelsea, where it's Cole Palmer's team.
Good point.
Tough, isn't it? And what about then, obviously, outgoings at Chelsea? Because Chelsea have made so much money, 250 million this summer on outgoings, and they could make even more. Vega's gone for, it looks like, around 30 million. But Nicholas Jackson, it's all gone a little bit quiet on that front, but it feels like with João Pedro, Liam Delap, that Maresca's happy with those two. So could Nicholas Jackson be off, and where?
I think Nicholas Jackson as well, you've got to talk about his behaviour. Again, he's not somebody who's gone on strike. Obviously, he can't be too pleased about the fact that Chelsea have gone out and signed Delap and Chelsea have signed João Pedro. He wants to be the main man somewhere. He still feels he's good enough to be the main man at Chelsea, but I don't think he's going to be the main man because of Delap and Pedro. So I think it's likely that he will leave Chelsea in the next few days before the window closes. I'm being told, wait until Tuesday. There could be big developments on Tuesday, and that's because the Newcastle-Liverpool game will be out of the way. We'll have some more clarity on what's going to happen with Alexander Isak. For instance, if Alexander Isak does end up leaving Newcastle, then Nicholas Jackson is really going to come into play, because he's one of the few sort of Premier League quality proven strikers out there who are available. A lot of clubs are looking for that type of player. About 5 or 6 clubs are interested in signing him, including Aston Villa, for instance. But I think the valuation is going to be a problem, because the information we're getting out of Chelsea is that they value him at the market price for strikers with Premier League experience. You see Sesko, for instance, you see, well, he doesn't have Premier League experience, but moving to the Premier League, Sesko Ekitike, the price that Isak potentially could go for if he leaves. So it would take big money to get Nicholas Jackson, but I'm pretty sure he's going to leave soon.
Yeah, it's a bit of a domino effect, isn't it? We'll see what happens after that Newcastle-Liverpool game on Monday night. Now, Blueco is a consortium led by Todd Bowley, Clear Lake Capital, Mark Walter and Hanjog Wiss. Now, Blueco have signed Julio Enciso from Brighton. Let's hear from their manager, Fabian Hertzler, now.
So, like you said, there are some rumors, there are some talks, but nothing's done yet, so we can't comment.
If the deal does go ahead, some fans might think Julio hasn't really fulfilled his promise. What's your take on Julio during his time, the spell that he's had here and the time that you've worked with him?
So, like I said, when I worked with Julio, I was very pleased. He's a young guy with big potential. He showed it, I think, during his time so far in Brighton. He showed it also when he played for his national team. So overall, like, it was very positive. Of course, there were also some moments where he had like a setback with his injuries. But overall, like, a young kid who wants to play football, where you really can feel the passion in him. So overall, it's very nice to work with him.
So that was Fabian Hertzler talking. Blueco have signed Julio Enciso. We're not sure whether that's Strasbourg or Chelsea, but we will talk about that a little bit later in Transfer Talk. But elsewhere, there was drama, big drama, argy-bargy in Ligue 1 at the weekend when Marseille midfielders Adrien Rabiot and Jonathan Rowe were involved in a spat after their game with Rennes. The row has led to both players being transfer listed by Roberto De Zerbi. I mean, Andy, how is this possible to have a full-on like punch-up in the dressing room after a game?
And after the first game of the season as well, slight overreaction, perhaps. The interesting thing is they'd just gone down 1-0 to Rennes, who were down to 10 men for a lot of the game. Rabiot actually stepped in as the peacemaker between Geronimo Rulli, the goalkeeper, and Jonathan Rowe, of course, came across from Norwich. And it ended up with Rowe and Rabiot having what Mehdi Benatia, the sporting director, called a very violent fight. He says he really loves Rabiot on and off the field, but it was something that they just couldn't let pass. He's got interest from Italy, and funnily enough, Jonathan Rowe might end up there as well. Not at the same club, I suspect.
Yeah, it's an interesting one, and we might touch on it a little bit later and what that, I suppose, means for both clubs and if they're even going to be able to sell them both, given it's so late in the window. Right, that is it from us here on Good Morning Transfers, but do not worry, because Good Morning Transfers returns tomorrow at 9 a.m.